and welcome to our Solutions to the COVID-19 Financial Fallout Roundtable. Today we'll be discussing specific topics to help soothe your mind, your money, and your momentum one step at a time. My name is Andrea Carter, and I help people achieve their best despite imperfect conditions, change, or crisis with neuroscience-based learning and development. I'm the founder of Andrea Carter Consulting, and on behalf of our guests, Lori Campbell and Elizabeth Nemovsky, I'd like to welcome you today and thank you for joining us. Before I begin, I'd like to just start by saying that this is an inclusive roundtable. We've put this hour together because of the hardships everyone is experiencing due to COVID-19. We're here to help, and help knows no boundaries. I will be discussing the impact of pressure, how people respond to pressure situations, how to dig yourself out of the dangers of pressure, and how to undo pressure as it arises so that you have pressure levers allowing you to make good decisions when you need it the most.
Hi, my name is Lori Campbell, and I would like to discuss today the issues around credit, around debt, what's available for you with your financial institutions and your creditors to resolve this type of debt coming out of COVID. I would also like to discuss when it's appropriate to consider bankruptcy as an option to deal with your financial situation. And last, I would like to also talk about your credit score and what it means and how you can keep it in good shape.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Nemovsky, and I'm the host of Finance is Personal. And today I will discuss the significance of reaching out to your friends and family and communicating during this time, and how people sabotage their ability to reach their financial goals, strategies in setting up an emergency fund, and protecting yourself from fraud.
Lori Campbell is a national spokesperson and expert on debt and credit issues. Her expertise has aligned her with leaders advocating for better protection for consumers and more transparency on financial products, especially in the areas of credit reporting, debt relief, and credit adjudication. Ms. Campbell has held close associations with all levels of government on advocacy and financial literacy. Lori was a member of the Financial Literacy Task under the past Minister of Finance, Jim Flaherty. She then went on as a member of the National Steering Committee for Financial Literacy. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Elizabeth Nemovsky has worked on Bay Street for over 20 years and is a well-respected financial literacy advocate and a champion for women's issues. Elizabeth comes from an immigrant background and is a first-generation Canadian. And what that means is that when her parents came to Canada, they taught her how to save every penny and how to work hard for every dollar. She is creator and host of Finance is Personal, a half-hour YouTube show on financial literacy geared towards women. Elizabeth is proud to be a Wealth Professional 2020 award finalist for the Mackenzie Investments Award for Female Trailblazer of the Year. And she is honored and extremely proud to be the inaugural recipient of the 2019 Wealth Professional IFSE Institute Award for Financial Literacy Champion. Elizabeth also has her Chartered Marketer designation from the Canadian Marketing Association. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Lori. Thank you, Lori. Now, let's talk about Andrea. Andrea Carter is a gender diversity and inclusion specialist and learning and development consultant who uses neuroscience to help people achieve their best despite imperfect conditions, change, or crisis. She brings over 18 years of research and practical application to her training, public speaking, and proven methods that result in doing great work despite high-pressure situations and imperfect conditions. Andrea is best known for her ability to bridge the gaps by creating collaborative working environments fueled by human power. She's also highly recognized for helping women advance their professional careers in male-dominated industries. And now we're going to begin with Andrea. Andrea, recently you've been featured on numerous panels, sharing your content on computing high-pressure situations and why this crisis is creating so many challenges. How is pressure affecting the average Canadian family right now?
Thanks, Liz. Yes, it is a super busy time. However, very rewarding. Rewarding because when people understand pressure and how pressure affects them, they can create pressure levers so that make better decisions, and take actions that empower them, increase their happiness, and help them achieve their goals. One of the problems that we've really seen with COVID is that people have never experienced compounding pressure in this way before. So most people think of this time as stressful, but stress and pressure are actually experienced differently within the brain and the body. And that's why the pressure of COVID has created such great fallout with high complexity. So let's talk a little bit about what pressure actually is. So pressure is experienced in your brain and physical body as a perceived response to a do or die situation. And you believe that your survival depends on the outcome of your actions. Pressure is experienced whenever you do something new, you change a habitual way of doing something that you're faced with, or it's when there's a high stake attached to an action and you're uncertain of the outcome. Pressure is actually perceived in two different types of scenarios as well. So the first is in single high pressure moments. The second is during a series of compounding pressure situations. So I'm going to go through the difference of those two in just a second, but let me just say that both pressure scenarios create the same response in the brain and body. One just lasts longer without relief and leads to longer lasting implications. So high pressure is experienced in short-term moments in time, but are latent with high intensity. That means that you feel a do or die sensation up until the event or the moment takes place. But then once it's over, your body and brain returns to its natural state. So think of what it feels like right before you deliver a presentation, you write a test, maybe you comment on something at the right time in the right moment, you make a hard decision in the moment. Going to your doctor is perceived as high pressure moments, and also seeing a financial advisor is experienced the same way. So this is why we really need to look at these things as we experience pressure. And leading up to or until the event is over, your neurochemistry changes and it causes more blood to go to your physical body. So oxygen goes to your muscles instead of your brain, and breathing changes. So all of this happens because your body is supporting you, or at least that's what your body thinks it's doing for the pressure moment that you're going through. So it really is a natural response. And once the pressure moment is over, the brain and body reactions calm down and you return to your normal state. So think about, the times that you're put on the spot and you notice that you're perspiring more. That's pressure in a pressure moment. With compounding pressure situations, however, these physical changes remain for longer durations and they pile on top of one another. So I like to compare it to being a great swimmer who's told to stand chest deep in the ocean and stay in one spot for 60 minutes. You have the ability to touch the ocean floor, you have the ability to breathe, but as the waves start to kind of crash over you and the sand moves under your feet, these small changes in the uncertainty of the ocean create internal pressure moments that compound and accumulate together. And this is actually what builds and changes. And that's what you feel when you're going through situations and whether you're determining if you are going to survive it. So from a COVID-19 perspective, many experience something like this. So it started with COVID news hit, people were told to stay home. Going home was experienced as a do or die situation because it was uncertain and something we'd never seen before. It was a seemingly small shift to stay home, but because it was uncertain, we didn't have answers, and that increased the internal pressure most people were feeling. Then the word pandemic was used and set off multiple reactions within each of us individually. And when crisis became a pandemic, once again, a pressure moment was felt. So while pressure is experienced uniquely by each individual, depending on what's going on leading up to this would have also been a factor to your initial reaction to the news. So if you had pre-COVID pressures, you were already dealing with, for example, anything was new in your world, maybe you were going through challenges or some change, or you already had any sort of pressure sensation going into the pandemic that changed how you reacted to the crisis. So all of those things each time you go through them, that pressure builds on top of the other pressure. When you look at changes in financial security and daily living, and also the judgment, okay? So every single time you did something, you were judged, and your reaction to how you were coping was judged. And each time you were judged, your brain perceives it as a do or die moment, because the brain is hardwired to search for acceptance, belonging, and love. And when you experience judgment, rejection, or separation from your normal, the area of the brain that experiences pain is triggered. So not only that, but no one has had a break from the news, social media, or what's happening in your immediate circle or around the globe. So when you don't have a break from pressure, just like being in the ocean, eventually that constant pressure resets your body's natural state to this new pressure state and creates what I call pressure danger, or the inability to recognize that you don't have the tools to relieve the pressure that you're feeling. And this sensation leads people to feeling helpless, out of control, and overwhelmed. And eventually it can lead to not being able to sleep, weight gain or weight loss, anxiety, depression, and another wave of pressure builds because it feels like nothing is going to save us. So what's really important about that is to understand the relief elements in place to help people. So we're now seeing the pressure of financial implications, with a lot of people not understanding how to handle their pressure or finances to move forward. It feels very do or die. And that's why I'm lucky to have Lori Campbell here, who's here to soothe some of that for us. Her wisdom she's about to share will act as a pressure lever as in itself to bring some of that empowerment back. So while lots of people are looking at debt, Lori, debt referrals, debt deferrals, payments on mortgages, credit cards, what information do they need to know that will help them take the right action? And what can they do to save their credit rating?
Well, Andrea, great questions. And, certainly that was brilliant. I think that it's really important to see the connection between debt and the emotional trauma that goes along with, worrying about how you're going to pay your bills, worrying about talking to your spouse or partner about debt, because that can also be a very scary conversation. Mm-hmm. Having that conversation even with your children about why they can't, buy things and why you can't afford certain things. This is very, very difficult for many people. And the one message I often say to individuals in this situation is you're not alone. Everyone feels like they're on an island when it comes to debt. And the number one reason people feel like they're on an island is simply because nobody talks about debt. No one talks about the bad parts of their life. And having debt is considered a very bad part of an individual's life, especially if they can't pay. And the one message I'd like to get out there to individuals listening is that you're not alone. There are so many people in the same situation. There's so many people that are feeling the same pressures that you are, and opening up about it and having that conversation is really a start to dealing with that debt and moving forward. So that's the first piece of advice I give the listeners. The second one is that don't bury yourself in a hole and not talk to your creditors. Talk to them. They are there for you, especially right now, because they're seeing so much of it. And there's some great programs out there to help individuals. I was talking to a senior VP of collections of a major bank the other day, and I was asking him, what is available to individuals today? And he said, well, of course, there's many programs where interest can be stopped on revolving credit cards and those types of things. And obviously interest deferred on mortgages. And also having the credit rating or credit score re-aged so that your credit score or your credit rating isn't affected during COVID. So that's one good news item for individuals that are really struggling to pay, especially that huge amount of interest on credit card debt, which we know can be up to 29.9% with some retail creditors. So talk to your financial institution. They actually have some great programs available right now. And, they will consider, even after COVID, after these measures have somewhat been taken out, to extend some of these interest relief programs, to extend perhaps just interest deferrals on mortgages. So don't assume that because the world is getting back to normal, that suddenly they're going to expect payment right away. Obviously, if you can pay, you should pay. You want to get rid of that debt as quickly as possible. But if you are struggling, do reach out to the financial institutions or whoever the creditor may be to see what programs they have in place. These are uncharted territories, not just for us, but for the banks and for all the institutions that lend money. As such, they are going to be more open to ways of helping customers stay with them, which is very important to individuals, and ways of helping individuals keep their credit score, which is also extremely important to individuals with good reason. A little bit later, I'm going to be talking about, the difference between, or when you should file a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal, or what other debt options are available to you. And I'll also be talking about your credit score and how that's impacted. So hopefully that'll, start the conversation for people to open up about their debt and talk freely about what's going on in their lives, because chances are they'll be able to get a lot of good advice from family and friends about it. So now I'm going to reach over to talk to Elizabeth and ask her a question about being in the midst of a financial crisis that we've never experienced before. We've just mentioned that. And with so many people out of work due to COVID and so many small businesses that are still closed, what should we look for while we are rebuilding our finances? And what are the mistakes most people make that sabotage their ability to reach their financial goals and their financial success?
Thank you so much, Lori. Well, one of the biggest mistakes, I believe, is impulse anything, whether it's impulse shopping, impulse trading on your investment account, any impulse decisions that you will make. We right now are inundated with sales, emails from every department store. Everyone's trying to make money while people are self-isolating at home. We've got boredom shopping as well. It's at your fingertips. Sale, sale, sale. There's sales everywhere right now. So I think that has got to be one of the biggest problems for people, the trap of online shopping. So people really need to avoid panic spending, because a lot of times, if you're depressed and you're not feeling well, you will go and buy that really expensive piece of something that'll make you feel really, really good. The problem is that something will make you feel really good for a very short period of time, and then you're going to have to worry about the debt payment and how you're going to pay that really expensive piece that you bought when you were depressed or not feeling well, and you bought it to make yourself feel better. One of the other things people have to be careful about is food delivery. As prices are going to be more expensive than actually going to the store and purchasing it on your own. And the thing is, online shopping, it's a bottomless pit. You can absolutely lose yourself and your mind and time. And quite frankly, right now, Canada Post is busier than they ever have been, and they're busier than Christmas time, if you can actually believe that. So we have to look at the panic buying that people were doing. You were looking at the toilet paper, the vinegar, the bread. People are impulse pet shopping as well. And I think that's one of the things that we really have to stay away from. If you're at home self-isolating, don't just go buy a new family member or pet because you're going to be at home for 3 months or whatever. These are family members. They're living, they're breathing, they need to be loved, they need to be taken care of, they need to go to the vet, which is expensive as well. So please don't do any impulse pet shopping. One of the key things too is if you look at sabotaging, FOMO, the fear of losing out, or the fear of missing out, or YOLO, which Drake always uses in his songs, you only live once. That's all quick gratification, and that's a lot of stuff that people use for social media so that their photo is everywhere and they're seen everywhere. And the bottom line is FOMO and YOLO will really put you in a really bad predicament. It'll sabotage you. It'll sabotage your wealth, actually. So try not to get into more debt. And if you really need to buy something, buy it on sale. My motto is to always purchase something on sale. And I'm really happy when I get something on sale. Last year, there was a store in the neighborhood that had dresses that were $1,300, which is a lot of money. However, they were moving out of that location and all the dresses were $99. So to me, I thought that was fantastic. Problem is, some people look at the dress and think, it's only worth $99. So Warren Buffett has always said, price is what you pay, but value is what you get. So always look at the value of whatever it is that you're shopping for. The other thing people don't think about, and they sabotage, if I want to go and buy something for $1,000, how many hours do I have to work to actually pay for that piece? So let's say I make $20 an hour. Okay, so $1,000 piece, $20 per hour, it's going to take me 50 hours to pay that off completely. So that's over a week's worth of hard work. But what happens if I put that on my credit card and I only paid $25, which probably isn't the minimum, but $25 isn't a lot of money. It'll probably take me 5 years to pay that off. Is it really worth all that hard work that you have to put into, going to work every day or whatever to pay that $1,000 off? One of the things too I wanted to bring up, back in November 2019, my Visa bill was insane. It was $13,700. Not that that is a normal spend for me, but that was a portion of our wedding. It was left over from the wedding in July. And I looked at the statement and it actually said, for $13,700, if you pay the minimum $10, the $10 was on the statement, at 19.99%, it will take me 108 years and 11 months to pay. I don't think any of us are going to be around that long, but $13,000, $700 in the grand scheme of things is not a big amount. So always pay much more than the minimum and pay more often. And think about layaways. In the olden days, if we really wanted something, we'd go into the store with a $20 bill and put your bill down and then go back the next week and keep adding to it so that you could actually walk home with your product. And I have so many more things to talk about, but I think my time has ran out. So I am going to talk to, before I talk to Andrea, I want to do a shout out to Prosper Canada. They work with governments, businesses, community partners across Canada, and they are there to help Canadians. So if you are feeling you're a little bit stressed or a little bit tight and you don't really know where you're going, they have tools on their website, which is prospercanada.org. Managing in tough times toolkit, managing your money toolkit, dealing with debt toolkit, budgeting and saving toolkit. So there are places that you can go for free information, prospercanada.org. Now we're going back to Andrea. Andrea, we've been under an enormous amount of pressure. How does pressure change one's behavior and decision-making process?
Yeah, great question, and kind of perfect timing. Couldn't have segued better. So first, I want to say that the mistakes that people are making that Elizabeth was talking about, those happen because people are going through high pressure moments or compounding pressure situations. So think about it from this way, from a neuroscience perspective, when someone experiences pressure, all that great blood flow leaves the brain, goes to the body, right? Super simple. That means when you're making a decision during pressure situations, that decision is happening without vital oxygen. So think about being on the website and surfing for whatever and doing an impulse buy. You're not breathing in that moment. And so you're actually not thinking clearly and you're not thinking dynamically. And people make mistakes and behave differently when they're trying to relieve pressure. So FOMO or YOLO, impulse buying, overindulging, buying without any strategy. That's behavioral response to help you relieve pressure. So just like lashing out, bursts of anger, reactionary behavior, that's also a behavioral response to relieving pressure. So human beings are actually wired to move towards things that feel good and move away from things that feel bad. If people don't have pressure levers though, and they don't know how to handle pressure, they'll buy something or do something to make themselves feel better. That pressure has to be released in some way. The brain is wired for that. So that means if you can't escape from something that feels bad, you're going to act in a way that isn't necessarily in alignment with what your goals are. So pressure does change your decisions. It changes your behavior, and how you adjust within the moment to pressure is really, really important to understanding why you respond the way that you do to your finances. So most people do not want to talk about money. They don't want to look at money. They want to put their head in the sand when it comes to debt. And the reason that is because your brain is wired to search for approval, acceptance, and belonging. I've already said that before. But in perceived do or die moments or compounding pressure situations, your brain is looking for a form of acceptance. So people buy things, say things, do things that connect to a sense of acceptance, like that reward of getting that, Louis Vuitton purse while you're sitting in COVID. So what I find fascinating, though, is that because of that need of approval, acceptance, or belonging, and because it's hardwired and innately needed, when people are judged, rejected, or cast out in some way, so let's say you don't have that Louis Vuitton purse, but then you get the purse and then you feel accepted. But let's say you get the purse, you don't have the money for it, and then somebody judges you and says, you shouldn't have bought that. Your brain actually experiences pain when you feel judged or rejected. So that pressure for belonging and the pressure trying to avoid pain causes people to make decisions and take actions that aren't in alignment with what they really want. And if you look at what most people went through over the past few months, that's what's being stimulated and simulated here because of COVID-19. And as we move forward, people owing money will experience an amplification of compounding pressure situations. It's a societal element that has been conditioned within people. And there's shame, there's guilt, there's rejection that's attached to debt and money issues. In fact, without going too far into this, it's also part of intersectionality that increases pressure and anger within race, diversity, and inclusion issues. So the typical debt story occurs because people yearn so deeply for acceptance that they want to move away from the pain of pressure and rejection so fiercely that they'll live a lifestyle that's out of alignment with their goals, decisions, and actions, which makes them feel like they can't trust themselves with money. And that is hugely important. Now, the good news is that while debt might be creating pressure for you right now, debt doesn't define you, and debt is a result of decisions, but you can learn how to trust yourself and make good decisions with money again. And that is going to start right away when you take small, positive steps in the right direction. And that being said, that's why I'm really excited about Lori coming back on now to talk about the pressure that people are going to be feeling around a really tough topic. And that topic is around looking at if you should go in the option of a consumer proposal or bankruptcy. So let's provide more relief on this for our listeners with the content that you're going to follow with here now.
Well, thanks very much, Andrea. It's interesting. You talk about, people wanting to be accepted and, not wanting to miss out. And at the same time, feeling so much shame around debt. And from my experience over the lifetime of my career, one thing that people often ask is, again, is my situation the worst you've ever seen? And, you're the first person I've ever told about my debt. And they've been carrying debt for often a decade, that they've been struggling to pay and paying only interest only, or just the minimum payment and not getting anywhere. And again, that's why I talk about opening up that conversation. So let's talk then about what options are available to people. I mentioned after my first question, that first of all, go to your bank, go to your financial institution, wherever you owe money to, and have a frank conversation. You might be surprised how willing they are to work with you. And, during these unprecedented times, we're going to find that creditors are a lot more lenient and a lot more understanding. And this may be a new way of doing business for them. And so let's not count them out of the picture when, often says, oh, the banks, they don't want to work with me. I think we're going to find some very, very interesting times over the next, 6 months to a year on how welcoming the banks and your creditors are to try to work with you. So that's number one. If you find that it's too far gone, you haven't opened your mail for 6 months, and you're obviously delinquent with your debt, and you really don't want to talk to your financial institution or it didn't go well, you could go to a not-for-profit credit counseling service. The counseling is free, it's confidential, which is so important to people. And the counselors are professionals in dealing with people that are struggling with financial problems, and you can get an unbiased opinion as to how you should move forward with your financial situation. So I strongly recommend that. It doesn't affect your credit rating just to talk to a counselor. Make sure it's a not-for-profit. I'm very clear on that. It only is if you go on a debt management program. So be aware of that and make sure, that's why I say talk to your financial institution first, because you might be able to avoid having your credit score, your credit rating affected at all. So that's the next step that people can look at. Obviously, you may want to try to sell assets or get a part-time job to try to bridge that gap. But if your situation again is too far gone and those options have already been considered or tried, you may be looking at dealing with a trustee in bankruptcy who could either walk you through a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy. Now, a consumer proposal is where you're saying to the creditors, like, hey, I can only pay a portion of the debt. I can pay some of it, but not all of it. And keep in mind, when you do a consumer proposal, the amount that you're proposing to the creditors, let's say it's 50% of the debt you have outstanding, so you owe $30,000, you're proposing $15,000. If you have $30,000 in assets, they're not going to agree to that. They want to make sure the assets that you have are no greater than the amount that you're proposing to repay in debt. And there's some loopholes around that depending on what the asset is, so you need to take a look at that. So a consumer proposal can last anywhere up to 5 years. It stays on your credit record for 3 years after you've paid it off in full, and then you're on your merry way. I know a lot of creditors will work with individuals who've had a consumer proposal, so that may be an option that you need to consider. And going back to a debt repayment program with credit counseling, that stays on your record for 2 years after successful completion. So the final step, I don't like to consider it a financial debt because I think there's a rebirth after it, because it really is an opportunity for you to start over, is a bankruptcy. Now with a bankruptcy, what you're saying to the creditors is, I cannot pay this debt anytime in a reasonable future. So, your situation is just too dire. You have very little in the way of assets. And so you will file a bankruptcy. They're going to take a look at your income. There are some rules. You might have to pay surplus income, if surplus in towards the bankruptcy if you make over a certain amount of money. It's dependent on family size and a few other things. So that's number one. You have to relinquish all your creditors, all credit card debt. You can't hide one in the back pocket saying, well, maybe I'll use this for a rainy day. No, it doesn't work that way. You've got to give them all up. And you basically have to have 2 counseling sessions. You have to present your budget to the trustee every month until you are discharged. That will stay on your credit record for about 7 years. Now, if it's a repeat bankruptcy and you've done it again, it's going to stay on your record for 14 years and you don't get an automatic discharge. So the goal of the insolvency system is to help unfortunate debtors reestablish themselves in a reasonable period of time and be able to move forward financially. It's not supposed to be a punitive system. However, if individuals are repeating the same patterns over and over again, and Andrea, you mentioned, trying to get out of that pattern of behavior and try to move forward to a better financial future, that's what you need to keep in mind. I will, say that one thing that touched on me, Andrea, that you said is that people, feel like they're bad with money sometimes. And the one thing message I would say is nobody's born bad with money, okay? No one's born with that trait or that gene that I'm just bad with money. Oh, I grew up, I've always been bad with money. Nobody has that gene. It's upbringing, it's experience, it's education, and anybody can improve their money management skills through better experiences and more education. Upbringing is something you can't control, but just because your parents may have not have been great with money doesn't mean your future is that you're bad with money. So I'll leave it at that, and now I'm going to move over to Liz and ask her another question. The pandemic has definitely opened our eyes to setting up an emergency fund, which is so important in any situation. What are some strategies to save to ensure you don't fall into this trap next time?
Yes, Lori, you are so correct. An emergency fund is really, really important. But I want to talk about getting there. What we need to do is start living a disciplined and frugal life. And what does this mean? This means that we have to get away from a wants life to a needs life. So we've had consumerism take over, and everybody wants something, and everybody wants what they want, and they get what they want, and then they go into debt. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about making frugality fashionable. That's my new buzz phrase right now. Let's make frugality fashionable. So not going out and saving your money. And back in November, during Financial Literacy Month, I started the Save $5 a Day program. It was a savings challenge that I started for people. Why $5 a day? Well, those are usually guilty pleasures for people. And if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you've taken all your money out, you can actually take the $5 a day and stick it in a drawer and just let it accumulate. $5 a day? Typically, you ask somebody to save $100 per month, and people are like, no, I need that money. I need to go out. I need it to enjoy my life. So if you look at behavioral finance, you actually save a lot more if you tell people to start saving $5 a day, because at the end of the month, it's $150. At the end of the year, it's $1,825, which is amazing. It's almost $2,000 that you would have never had. And both Lori and Andrea talked about patterns and behavioral patterns. Well, it takes human beings 21 days and 3 weeks to actually learn a new habit. If you start saving $5 a day, in 21 days, it'll become the norm for you, and you won't even have to worry about it anymore. So I'm just going to go back quickly to guilty pleasures, right? Lattes, easy, $5. If you didn't save that $5 a day and you bought a latte every day, it's $1,825 that you wouldn't have in your pocket. But if you added $14 a day lunch to the $5 a day latte, in 5 years, you would have spent $43,000, which is a lot of money, right? However, if for ladies, if you add in a $40 pedicure, manicure, now that $5 per day latte, $14 per day lunch, $40 mani-pedi per week, and let's just put in a $200 for the month to go out and have fun. In 5 years, it's going to cost you $55,800, which is a pretty nice down payment on something. However, if you put that on your credit card and you actually don't pay it off and it's compounded at 20%, well, the grand total is actually $94.635. So that's a latte a day, $14 a day lunch, mani-pedi once a week, and $200 to go out. So think about the amount of money that you save for an emergency fund. What is an emergency fund, you ask? Well, it's something that you use for an emergency, kind of like this COVID pandemic. You don't use it to go and buy something new. You don't use it to go on a short trip somewhere, but you use it for an emergency. Do you have a home? Is your roof leaking? Oh my gosh, did you crack your tooth and you need an extra couple of thousand to get your teeth fixed? Or God forbid, there is a death and you need the money for a funeral. But that's what an emergency fund is for. What other things can you think about in order to save money? Do you actually look at your credit card statements? Do you look at the statement to see whether you actually purchased something on there? Or if you have a reoccurring monthly statement, is it the actual price that you had signed for? Because I can tell you, years ago, when I bought a security system for my home, it was 20 years ago, it was probably $15 or $20 a month. But now, 20 years later, it was $43 a month. So when I called up the company and said, this is ridiculous, I'm actually going elsewhere, they said, what can we do to keep you? So to keep me as a client, I'm paying almost half price of what I was. I have a new state-of-the-art security system with all the bells and whistles that I didn't pay for. So go and talk to the vendors that are charging you monthly and see whether you can renegotiate what that price is. The other thing too is, have you stopped a payment, but they still keep taking monthly, or they keep adding it to your credit card per month? And what about if you needed a refund from someone? My credit card was compromised back in March, but I had a refund of over $200 from another entity. And here in June, I still didn't have it. So I called the credit card company and they said, oh, it should have automatically transferred, but it didn't. And it was just kind of lost somewhere. So always look at your statements and always look at what you're paying, because you may be overpaying, and this is your money and it's your after-tax money. So always be careful. The other thing is, let's just go back to basics. We've all come from humble beginnings. I come from peasant stock. Both of my parents came from, small farms in Macedonia. So, use what you came from. I started this ABCDEFG in trying to help you save money. Under A, I'm looking at accountability. Be accountable to yourself. If you cheat and you go out and buy that really expensive thing, you're actually cheating yourself. Budgeting. B, budgeting. It works, but you have to be committed to it, right? It's like working out. If you don't have it in your calendar, you're not going to work out because you're going to keep saying that you don't have time, you've run out of time, you can't do it. Communication, C, both Andrea and Lori were talking about communicating. Talk to people, ask for help. There've got to be people in your family, there've got to be professionals out there that you can speak to. Communicate, because you know what? There is no shame in being in debt. There is no shame in asking for help, because that's really important. Once you can ask for help, you are on your way. The other thing is D, discipline. Make a plan and stick to it. If you can't go out, tell your friend you can't afford it. That's not a big deal. There's no shame in that. I used to do that when I first bought my house. I couldn't afford to go out with my friends. So I just said to them, hey, for the next 6 months, I'm not going out. And it worked. And nobody cared. Nobody judged, right? E for education. Learn about financial literacy and keep learning, because as we go every day, there are new things to learn and new things to find out about. F, frugal. Live a frugal lifestyle. Make frugality fashionable, right? If you learn to live within your means now, then it'll be so much easier when you retire, and just living a frugal life is the key thing right now. And I think it's really cool, by the way. And goals, G, goals. Create your own goals. An incredible roadmap to get you to the next place. So 5 practical steps to living a debt-free and anxious, stress-free, that's a tongue twister, stress-free life in order to have financial wellness. Number 1, stop impulse shopping. Don't live in denial. 2, save $5 per day. In 21 days, you will have learned a habit, and that money can go towards your emergency fund. 3, if you can't pay off your credit card, pay off more than just the minimum. 4, don't get sucked into FOMO or YOLO, right? Live a disciplined and frugal life. And 5, cash is king. If you can't afford it, don't buy it. Pay yourself first. So Andrea, we're back to you again. What's the undoing effect? How can people dig themselves out of the danger of pressure so that they make good decisions when it's needed the most?
Thanks, Liz. Well, it's so great following you, because you've set up such a great stage for talking about the undoing effect. I love it. So it was perfect. The undoing effect is actually a term that psychologists use to explain how to undo the negative effects of pressure. And the way that happens is using positive levers for change. So some of the suggestions that Liz just gave were actually ways that you can use positive levers to help you with the pressure that you're feeling from your finances. The undoing effect was actually just born from an experiment that was performed in the year 2000. And essentially what the study showed was that there's bursts of positive emotions that when they happen, when we're under pressure, they broaden our ability to think clearly. And it also provides a really quick and powerful antidote to pressure. And that in turn improves our focus and our ability to make good decisions when it's needed most. So in times where there's like a FOMO or YOLO or impulse buying situation, using this acronym that I created called DIG as a quick blueprint to undo the negative effects of pressure so that you stay empowered despite imperfect conditions, despite change or crisis, or that pressure of just trying to fit in or push away the rejection. This is really what will help you shift and take on different habits and make different choices faster. So I've included this pressure information for our listeners in an easy access download below. As well, I should mention that both Liz and Lori have their handouts that are on this page that you can access right away as well. Now, that said, when you feel pressure mounting, you have a choice in that moment to either allow the sensation to overcome you and your decisions and your behavior, or you can take action to overcome the sensation of pressure itself. And you do that using this acronym DIG. I wanted to give people the ability to control pressure because you can't control the neurochemical reaction to your environment or to change or crisis, but you can control how much pressure you feel when you're in them, okay? So D stands for decide what to focus on. When you notice pressure building, the first thing that you can do is just acknowledge that your body is going through a pressure response. By acknowledging it, you'll remind yourself to take a breath in so oxygen can go back to your brain, and you can then ask some specific questions to help you decide what to focus on in the moment. So a couple of examples that I like to use is, what's the most important thing for me to focus on right now? Or what can I do to just take one positive, proactive step? Okay, asking these questions, what it does to your brain is it actually initiates the first part of the undoing effect by giving yourself a positive element to look at. So what's one positive proactive step? That in itself is a lever for relief. Next comes the I. The I stands for identifying what you do have control over. And when you look at what you have control over, you create a mind map for change. And the reason that's important is because the human brain is constantly up-leveling mental maps to navigate complex changes. And, we've been wired for thousands of years of evolution that in order to survive, we need maps of our environment, we need maps to strategize how we're going to get food and sex, and even maps of possible effects of our actions. And these maps are vital to people to being able to succeed, especially after a crisis. Each mental map after a crisis or adversity, there's really 3 paths people will take from the map, depending on how much control they think they have moving forward. So the first path is a circular motion, meaning the negative creates no change and they end up where they started. The second path leads to more negative consequences and a further kind of spiral. But both of these occur when people aren't able to identify what they have control over, so they make similar decisions and take actions that don't actually serve them. Okay? The third path, however, leads people from setbacks to greater success by seeing that they are more capable than they were before the crisis. And when someone can identify what they have control over, the brain shifts out of reactionary mode and into problem-solving mode. And this is instrumental because it allows people to feel powerful and capable rather than helpless or victim-like. So there are 2 questions that you can use to help you identify what you do have control over, and they're in the handout. Lastly, G is get growing by finding your positive opportunities. And both Elizabeth and Lori talked about this as well. But when you focus on something positive during pressure situations, you undo the physical repercussions of pressure. So there's a quick burst of positive emotions, and that broadens your thinking, it improves your focus, and it helps you focus better. So all the elements that you need so that you make good decisions and create great actions when it matters the most. And again, there are 2 examples of the questions that you'll use to help initiate the element of get growing. There's also another really great way to get growing, and Lori's going to talk about that. We can use that acronym DIG, yes. Also assess financial pressure people are under. And that can be used so that they access resources that are legit
Yes.
So can we shift gears a little bit? Can you share about how someone can decipher between what resources are legitimate and which ones are fraudulent or scams? Because this is also a place of learning and a place where we can take control so that we make better decisions and get into that third element, that third pathway of growing.
Right. Thank you, Andrea. You know, one of my biggest beefs, and one thing that I know all of us three ladies have been doing over our many years of trying to help individuals, is advocating. Mm-hmm. Advocating to make sure that individuals do not fall victim of scams. And, you know, I will talk to you about, you know, one of the biggest beefs that I have is consumer, credit repair scams, where and they're prevalent on the internet. And I know individuals are worried about their credit rating, their credit score. And I know this is so important. This is one of the biggest issues many people have, many Canadians have. But there's no quick fix to improving your credit score. It takes time and it takes behavior that is moving in the right direction over time. So I want to talk a little bit about credit scores after I talk about this scam. And the scam goes something like this. It says, improve your credit rating immediately. And so individuals will click on this and they'll say, we'll help you improve your credit rating immediately. And what we'll do is we will give you a loan for $1,000. You pay the loan back and we'll report to the bureau that you paid this back. So far, so good. You get a loan, you repay it. The problem is you don't get the loan. You get a tablet or something, some small $50 thing that you can check your credit rating on that doesn't work often. And what they'll do is they'll make you pay this fake loan back over a period of a year or 2 years. Sometimes it could be more than $1,000. It can be up to $2,000. You repay this, they'll report to the bureau, one trade line to the bureau that you paid this on time. The problem is you're paying for something you didn't get, so you're paying off a loan that you actually did not get, so you're putting money towards this. Second, if you don't pay, they put a negative report on the bureau up into the amount that you paid. And third, the third problem is that, quite frankly, one trade line on the bureau will not help you if you've gone bankrupt or you've had some significant financial difficulties. Now, I know both Equifax and TransUnion are trying to deal with this issue, and I believe there's been some headway on this, so I'm glad about that. But don't be fooled. These credit scam artists are out there trying to tell you that they can help you improve your credit score. That's not the truth, and that's not the way it works. So now I just want to talk a little bit about credit scores. So a credit score can go anywhere between 300 and 900. So, and again, Andrea, like you, there's information on the site about the way credit scores work and how you can make sure you keep your credit score in good shape. So it goes anywhere between 300 and 900. Obviously, the closer you get to 900, the better. Anywhere below, 500, 600 is very, very problematic. You really want to be over 700. How do you get there? You pay your bills on time. Number one, pay off as much of it as you can if you've got revolving credit. Don't just make the minimum payment. Show that you can pay more than that. Limit the number of credit cards or number of type of debt vehicles to very few, like 2 or 3 is all you need. Have some diversity in there, not just a credit card. You may want to have a line of credit in there as well to show diversity. So make sure that you always, always, always check your credit rating once a year or credit score once a year through Equifax and TransUnion to make sure there's been no fraudulent activity on there which could bring down your credit score. Make sure that you don't have tons of inquiries. If you're going to go and, let's say, shop around for credit and you apply to 5 different places, the creditors see that as shopping around and the ability to get yourself into financial difficulty. So be very, very careful. You can check your credit rating yourself, or your credit score yourself. That's called a soft inquiry, and that means it won't show up. But if a creditor checks your credit score or your credit rating, that's a hard inquiry and it will show up. And the final thing to remember is that each creditor that you're applying for credit to will see, they have a different model for the credit score, but if you keep the tips in mind that I've just mentioned, you'll have a good credit score and you will obviously benefit from that because you'll be able to get credit when you need it, and you'll be able to get it at an optimum interest rate rather than paying more than you should. So those are all very good tips for individuals to improve their credit score. I will also say there are other scams out there. There's scams to, you can get a loan from this place. All you need to do is provide all your information. You might need to pay something to have the loan processed. Anytime you have to pay any fee for a loan, it's illegal. So be very wary of that as well. Payday loans, I mentioned, they're not fraudulent by any means, but I mentioned them because the cost of borrowing is so huge with payday loans that people who get themselves into the payday loan cycle have a very, very hard time of getting out of that cycle. So if you are thinking about getting a payday loan, look at going to a not-for-profit credit counseling service. Look at going to your bank or some other financial institution with lower rates before even considering a payday loan. Unfortunately, people who have one payday loan often end up with 10 payday loans, and it's a vicious cycle that is very, very hard to get out of. So now I'm going to turn, and I know that Liz has quite a bit to say as well about some of these issues, so I'm going to pass it on to her. Liz, while self-isolating due to COVID-19, fraudsters and scammers, I know you're going to have much to say about this as well, have escalated and multiplied the amount of online scams with fake websites. Crazy. Phishing emails, tax romance scams. Oh, what red flags should we look for, and how can we protect ourselves in these types of situations, Elizabeth?
Thank you so much, Lori. I think I probably need an hour and a half just to talking so that I can actually talk about everything. So but fraud is alive and in full access mode. And I'm just going to go through quickly because I've got about 5 or 6 pages worth of things, but I want to make sure that I cover everything, right? Scammers right now are preying on our vulnerability. Scams and frauds typically increase when there's a time of crisis, a disaster, and now this pandemic. So people are at home, they're vulnerable, they're alone. This is the time. I mean, I can't tell you how many, I got a fax sent to me at work, fax, emails, personal emails at work, text. Like it just keeps going on and on. So we are all online targets, and we are all going to be caught off guard at some point because we're human. This is what happens, right? So there are COVID-19 oils to keep you safe, $1,000 for a coronavirus vaccine. There is no vaccine. Do not spend $1,000. There was somebody selling HVACs for $3,000. And basically, it would take 99% of the COVID particles out of the air. And Sean O'Shea from Global News did an incredible story on this. So really keep your eyes open and your ears open to hear about these things. There are false COVID-19 test kits or ultraviolet lamps. Thousands of websites have been shut down in Canada already. Scammers are on high alert. Fake charities, fake websites equals donations to scammers and fraudsters. They are calling you in the middle of the night to tell you that your computer is infected and you've got to give them your credit card. People are coming to knock on your door saying that they're here for the bed and breakfast, and they want to look around and see where you live and what's going on inside. People are anxious and stressed, and they're not paying attention. There are fake Government Canada and Canada Revenue Agency websites. There are malicious scams, and they're misinforming people about the Canadian government, the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit. Scammers are hoping that you're desperate and you'll just click on their links. Do not click on their links. Be aware if you're sent a text or an email from the government related to COVID. Don't ever just open an attachment. Talk to a friend, delete it, or actually call the entity, call the government, call the bank, call the institution to find out. Never, ever, ever share personal or financial details over the phone, text, or email. And always contact the agency, as I said, or the department. There's also cryptocurrency scams. Remember Quadriga? Rita Turcher at the Globe and Mail just wrote an article, and she said, there are legitimate cryptocurrency players out there, but she has a great line in the article, and she says, not only do securities regulators require more tech-savvy staff for fraud detection and enforcement, but they also need more money to educate investors about crypto market risks, right? And that always falls under, if you don't understand it, don't invest in it. If you don't understand it, it's okay to walk away from it, right? Red flags: a stranger contacts you and you're a beneficiary of a $5 million windfall, but you keep it a secret. Send them your bank account information and they'll share 40% of it with you. Strangers don't have money to give you. There is nothing for free. There's also another scam where a woman will call you at home from a private number and say that she's a neighbor, worried about you. Are you okay? Do you feel vulnerable? Strangers are not going to do this. You've got friends and family that can reach out to you, and friends and family that you can confide with. You remember when we were growing up, we were always told, do not talk to strangers. Well, that is really evident right now. Do not respond to strange emails. Do not text to people that you don't know, and do not talk to strangers. Hang up immediately. It's not rude. It's okay. Also, phone scammers are starting to record you. If they call you and say, hello, Elizabeth, do you have a minute for me? And you say yes, and they ask you these pointed questions. If you answer the questions, they actually have a verbal voice print for validation. And some of the banks will actually use your voice to confirm certain things, right? So be on high alert. If the opportunity is promising, there's high returns, short period of time, or you need to send money outside of Canada, or you need to pay money, as Lori was saying, to access more money, it's a scam. Don't do it. Romance scams. We all want to be loved, especially right now since we've been at home self-isolating. Do not share any of your personal information or send some guy that's in love with you that's living in Egypt and he needs $3,000 to come to Toronto to see you. Just don't do it. Credit cards. A lot of credit cards are being compromised right now. And there was a story that I wanted to talk about that was in the Globe and Mail. This gentleman was called by somebody who supposedly worked at JP Chase. The person knew the gentleman's name, last name, knew the last 4 digits of the bank account, and knew that he actually did invest with JP Chase. They called him and said to him that his debit card had been compromised, and basically what he had to do was set up a digital bank account, and they sent him a link, which he clicked on while he was on the phone with them, and he filled it all out, activated it, and by the time he hung up the phone, $300 had been taken out of his debit card. So if you are unsure and the bank or any institution contacts you and says this is a fraud, look at your account. You'll be able to see if anything has been taken out of your account. Call the institution. Always call and follow up. That should be the given right now, because there are so many scammers out there. I mean, I'm sure that Lori and Andrea and I, sometimes we look at it and we're not quite sure, and they're really good. They will be able to send me a scam phishing email from Andrea with Andrea's information, and I actually think it's from Andrea, but it's not. Always look at where it's coming from, right? And a lot of times, Peterborough Police just went through this thing a couple of days ago where they had hundreds of phone calls from people. It was that CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, social insurance scam, right? They want your social insurance number. In the recordings, they ask for social security number, and that's in the United States. But what they do is they threaten that they're going to come over and arrest you. And I can tell you that CRA is not going to arrest you, and our social insurance numbers do not expire. So if you did not initiate the call and you don't know who you're talking to, pause, stop, and think. And the other thing is too, right now, there are a lot of investment firms that have had their logo stolen online, and you've got the scammers, the scam websites, and basically they may have some Bitcoin logo on there. They will ask you to invest with PayPal or a credit card, and investment institutions don't do that. They also will give you or guarantee you a 15% daily return, which we can't do either. So if you are unsure and you're going to invest, contact the Ontario Securities Commission, contact IROC, the Investment Industry Regulatory Organization of Canada, contact the MFDA, the Mutual Fund Dealers Association, or the Alberta Securities Commission, or the BC Securities Commission, or one of the commissions in the area that you live in. Because if you're unsure, don't do it. Remember, if it's too complicated, you really don't want to be in it. Also, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre is a really, really good resource. Their phone number, 1-888-495-8501, 1-888-495-8501, and their website is antifraudcenter.ca. And I think I probably ran out of time. So just be diligent, take care of yourself. And before I go, June is seniors month. So why don't you reach out to a senior and help them out and explain passwords to them and explain text to them, explain emails and everything else. Reach out to a senior and help them out. And on that note, Andrea, I think you have some wonderful closing remarks for us.
Well, what an incredible roundtable we have had. Thank you both for being here. This does conclude our solutions to COVID-19 financial fallout roundtable. It was a pleasure to have you and our attendees here to explore solutions to help soothe your mind, your money, and your momentum one step at a time.
I was on mute. Thanks very much, Andrea. I would like to say thanks to the audience and to Elizabeth and yourself. You know, if there's one message I can get out to everybody is that you're not alone. Please understand there's so many other people in the same situation. Reach out to a friend, a family member, a professional, and get the help that you need. Do your homework, like Liz says, because you don't want to be a victim of a scam in a situation you're already struggling financially. And it's often the people that can least afford it that are often victims of scams. Thank you very much. It was my pleasure and a pleasure to work with you two lovely ladies. And I hope our information was valuable to our audience.
And thank you, Laurie and Andrea. You guys are a great team, and I'd love to do this again with you at some point. Best wishes to everyone out there. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember to download the free content we have on this page. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye for now.
Bye for now, everyone.